Athens, 430 BCE, an infamous year for the city-state, a plague descended. 2 years prior, in 432 BCE, the Peloponnesian War broke out between the Athenian Empire and the Peloponnesian League. Boris Johnson, the UK's Prime Minister, whose CV includes the rugby tackling of innocent children and hobbies such as ziplining, is no Winston Churchill. Instead, Pericles, the Athenian statesman, subsequently had to deal with the plague of Athens in 430 BCE. Johnson's self-proclaimed love for Pericles means such a comparison can be drawn with COVID-19. Johnson versus Pericles. So what was the plague? What were the Athenians suffering from? Modern epidemiologists' predictions include typhus or perhaps typhoid. Nonetheless, Pericles' decision to call upon the inhabitants of rural Attica to come inside the city seemed like another great idea from Pericles. Sparta's clear advantage on land was well known, and Pericles knew the Athenian navy could supply and defend Athens. One fairly major problem was Pericles' ignorance of germ theory, a shame since he only missed that memo by 2,500 years. So instead, the grain Athens imported into Perikles carried the disease straight into the heart of a crowded and hungry city. Much like Cummings travelled 260 miles to be closer to his relatives, humanity continues to make great decisions. There are certainly numerous comparisons between Johnson and Pericles, HS2 and the Periclean building policy, Johnson's Brexit and Pericles' confidence in Athens' supremacy over Sparta. However, the ultimate test of a leader is surely at the hardest hour. In 430 BCE, the plague claimed an estimated 75,000 lives, and perhaps as many as 100,000. Pericles died from the plague, but as we're all well aware, Boris survived his onslaught of COVID-19. So rather, Thucydides, who also survived after contracting the plague, could share Boris's newfound love for the NHS. Social distancing is emblematic of the role of the state and its position in protecting its citizens. America. And yet Thucydides claimed the catastrophe was so overwhelming that men, not knowing what would happen to them next, became indifferent to the rule of religion or law. A mass grave of nearly 1,000 tombs, dated between 430 and 426 BCE, was discovered outside of Athens. The true evil of coronavirus is hidden from society. As we all sit at home and clap for the NHS on a Thursday, the doctors and nurses must live through the very same fear those in 430 BCE must have experienced, the death and hopelessness of the lives one cannot save. Nonetheless, the UK has not lost hope. Whilst Johnson's confidence in Britain's negotiating power over the EU, 1 versus 27 always sounded like a great idea, was reminiscent of an arrogant Pericles. Learn from history? Never. Johnson's handshaking bravado has left him noticeably quiet after his fate was left to the gods. No longer is Boris the jovial politician behind numerous eponymous endeavours, but rather altogether a seemingly more serious fellow. So what can history tell us? Well, it tells us to study science. Well, I can't say that. It was something different. Okay. So what can history tell us? Well, it tells us the line between imitation and hubris is a narrow one indeed. Is Johnson's admiration of Pericles as sincere as he made it seem? We will never know, but instead the plague of Athens demonstrates that pride certainly becomes before a fall, something Boris now knows all too well. As the UK surpasses a totally unacceptable 50,000 deaths, the potential for a second wave, Dominic Cummings' eye test, and a homebound nation all speak to the very real threat of the future. Following Pericles' death and the subsequent defeat of Athens in the Peloponnesian War, Athens' fate was not helped by the disaster of 430 BCE. How far will COVID-19 impact inequality and the lives of ordinary people across the UK? As 40 million Americans lose their jobs, and ONS in the UK found that people were twice as likely to die from COVID-19 if you were from a poorer area, COVID-19 cannot be held as a great leveller, but as an ally to further inequality.